Good evening. I'm Professor Anthony Woodman and I'm Deputy Vice Chancellor here at the University of West London, and I'm delighted to welcome all of you joining us online for this evening's webinar. But actually I view it very much as what I hope is a chat with a really exciting panel. But above all, I hope that you are all well and that you are all safe. It's a real pleasure for me to be able to welcome an outstanding panel. And all of them, I'm very grateful up front for being able to give up time when at the moment we know there are so many things that keep us occupied. But yeah, I'm delighted. They are all such great friends of the university and all of our students and alumni. So thank you in advance for coming along. But more important, I know that they've got some great advice, but also some great career stories along the way that will be able to, I think, put into context some of the discussion points that we have. And around those discussion points, I would encourage you to be able to put any questions or comments that you have into the chat. And what we'll do as we go through the next 55 minutes or so, look to try and bring in as many of those as we can. Apologise in advance if we don't get to your question. It was a perfectly good question. It's just, as with all of these things, having to try and judge and manage it. And it's probably likely down to me that I didn't use the technology properly and didn't see it and read it. But let's see how it goes. So anyway, what I'd like to do, I'm going to introduce the panel we've got, and I'm going to do that in alphabetical order. So I'm delighted that the University of West London has a long and solid partnership with Brentford Football Club. And that's really culminated this year in the university becoming a founding partner as the clubs move to the amazing new stadium in Lionel Road. And if none of you have had the opportunity to go and see the ground in the little window we have, as soon as we get out of lockdown, please go down and look, you'll see great football in a great environment. So therefore, it really is a pleasure to be able to welcome Rasmus Anderson, who is Director of Football at Brentford. And Rasmus is, well, he'll tell you more about himself. He's a man of many really interesting talents, from being a best-selling author, entrepreneur, motivational speaker, and particularly around performance development. And certainly those of us who have been working with Brentford for some period of time could certainly see the impact that's had on the club. But he's also an advisor of many businesses around the world. And so it's great to have Rasmus with us. If I then move on to Wendy Bartlett. UWL has a long-standing and well-deserved reputation in supporting education and training of professionals in hospitality. And our next panelist is a really good friend of the London College of Hospitality and Tourism here at the university. And so it's a real delight to introduce Wendy Barlett, who's Executive Chairman of Bartlett Mitchell. And, you know, Bartlett Mitchell, and Wendy, I'm sure, will tell us more about as we go through the evening, is an award-winning caterer co-founded in 2000. But the bit to me that really struck me, and I think this would be very relevant to our discussions, has twice been voted a Sunday Times best company to work for. And I think that tells us something, and I'm sure that'll come through. Moving on, London College of Hospitality and Tourism also is the home to the university's 737 simulator aircraft. And that supports our commercial pilot and aviation management activities. And that's why it's such a pleasure to be able to welcome Adil Mubara, as Adil is the country manager for the UK and Ireland for the Royal Brunei Airlines, and also sits on the board of airline representatives. So again, you're really interested to hear some of Adil's take on where we are with the current climate, but where things are likely to go as things should improve. And then my final panelist represents a company that doesn't actually need any introduction, but I'm pretty sure that most of us will not realise that there's much more to Sega than Sonic the Hedgehog. And as I was preparing for the evening, I just told Stuart was that I see that Sonic is 30 years old this year. You know, time flies from when we first met that lovable little character. But Sega is an amazing partner to the university, and I really must thank Stuart for Sega's donation of a significant number of laptops to the university, and which has allowed us to help students through the pandemic who have found access to technology very, very difficult. It's made such a difference to them and them being able to deliver what they have the talent to do, but technology was the one barrier. So Stuart, please, many, many thanks for what you've done. So therefore, it is an absolute pleasure to be able to introduce Stuart Wright, who's Chief Technology Officer at Sega. And as I've said, there is so much more to it than Sonic, and therefore Stuart oversees a broad range of technical teams delivering strategy, e-commerce, business transformation. So I know that those were very poor introductions, will have missed a lot out. So what I'm going to try and do is to start this evening off is I'm going to ask fairly randomly, Rasmus, Wendy, Adil and Stuart, a very sort of gentle opener for 10 to see how it goes. And I think actually, Wendy, if I could come to you, a real simple one, back to the very beginning, you know, how did your career start? What got you on that first foot into the great career you've had?
I started as a pot washer when I was about 15 in a club in Kensington because my sister worked there and she needed someone to wash up. So I used to go on a Friday, Saturday night, and then it was up below a hotel. So then I ended up doing reception, and then that was how I got into the world of hospitality.
You see, it's often, I think that's really great to hear. It's sometimes just those very simple opportunities that open doors, and it's being ready to embrace those. So that's really great to hear.
Hospitality is a great industry because it's not necessarily about your qualifications. It's more to do with your aptitude, and a lot of entrepreneurs are born through hospitality for that reason.
Yeah. That no makes a lot of sense. We'll be coming back to hear more about how you then went from there to where you are now as we go on forward. Adil, I'm going to come to you. What about for you? What has brought you to where you are today? How did your career start?
Well, coincidentally, I was also a pot washer in a restaurant in Wandsworth. And at the time, I was studying for a certificate in travel and tourism. And I met a gentleman by the name of Ken Howe, who owned a small travel agent. And we just got talking, and he employed me as a receptionist, handing out tickets. And that's where my career started in travel.
Okay, that's great to hear. There's certainly a bit of a theme here, because my best job I've still ever had was working bars in North Devon when I was a teenager. Second best job's my current one. Best one was still back then. So there's a lot to be said about hospitality as a great career start. Rasmus, I'd like to come to you, but I want to just add a slightly different flavour. I'm interested to where your career started, but I wonder if you could also reflect at the same time, would you have, if with hindsight, would you have used that same entry into your career that you've now come down the line on?
Yeah, thanks. Good to attend tonight. So my first job was working at the local newspaper. So I was making summaries of all the local football games for the newspaper. I called the coaches and I talked to them about the game, the primarily amateur games, and then I made a summary for the next day in the newspaper. So I think today I've actually, when I look back, what my first job was a combination of what I've ended up doing. I run a football club, and at the same time I've been writing books. So I think I've managed in that respect to bring my two passions together. I mean, in hindsight, it's always, you always tend to build like a story about, so it all makes sense when you look back. But when you make the choices, your career choices, you have to do it without knowing the outcome. And I've never been a big believer in having a career plan, like you have to get this job because when you get that job, then you have this job. I think it's more about that's what I try to follow myself as a principle, to follow my passion and focus on the task in front of me, and then doing that to the best of my ability, and then see where that takes me. And I think then you are more present and not thinking too far ahead.
No, sure. Some really, really interesting comments. I'm going to come back on that as we go on through, Rasmus, about your observations on that, because I think there's some really important advice there about not beating yourself up around some so rigid plan that you suddenly think very early on things aren't going to go in the right direction. But we'll talk more about that. So then with Stuart, and I know before we started, we talked very, very quickly that you hadn't started necessarily working in an IT sector. So again, same as I had with Rasmus, was for yourself. You know, where did your career start, and you know, any reflections about whether you do it the same or do it different now?
Well, you're not going to believe this, but also my first job was a pot washer as well. So we got to be, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I started my career in hospitality, if you like, as a pot washer, and then I went to college to do catering. And would I do anything different? And how did I end up in computing? I guess the thing is that, you know, careers can be quite unpredictable, and you know, everyone's just looking for someone who's smart and can take work off their hands. But I think that I wouldn't do anything differently, because I think where I've ended up is through a bit of fortune and a bit of luck and a bit of skill, and I think that you know, you find your own route, and you know, and nothing's set. And I'm with Rasmus in as much as that, not too rigid a path, you know, because there's always the unknown will just come along. But yeah, it can be a strange thing. It's generally getting your foot in a door. So, you know, and my example of, you know, how I ended up in computing in some ways is that, you know, it's just by a bit of fortune, of being in the right place at the right time, those sort of things, but making those opportunities yourself, and putting yourself forward to be able to see these opportunities, I suppose.
Which actually is that's very nicely, and I'm delighted that we've already got a question come through, because we got one of our someone who's joined us this evening is new to the UK, and actually was asking about how do you get that first job opportunity in a new country. And I'm just, from what I'm hearing and listening, is that the sort of advices that you're saying sound quite generic. It's taking those early opportunities and relishing them and just presenting yourself out there. Is that generally what any of you in the panel sort of feel? You know,
I think that you have to. I think it's very different. I started a pot washer and own my own company. You know, the guy who owns one of the biggest franchises, Costa, started as a barista. So wherever you start doesn't mean to say that's where you're going to finish. It's about taking the opportunities and learning from whatever job you do, whether it be retail, hospitality, you know, working in civil service, whatever it is. Take that opportunity if that opportunity's there and that's the only job you can get at the moment. But then look to see how you can build from that going forward. And even if it's, you know, doing charity work or volunteering, all of that adds to that richness, because life is about networking as well. And you need to know you're going to be where you network. That doesn't necessarily have to be at work. There are other ways of networking. So look at everything as an opportunity, and don't get fixated on that I only can, you know, get a job as a certain thing at a certain salary in order to move on and get stuck in that position. You need that adaptability.
Yeah, no, I think that's useful, that adaptability. Rasmus, can I come to you? You've worked in around the world. Again, your experiences of when you've gone to a new country, about getting in. It may have been later career, not just early career, but just getting those first opportunities. Would you very much agree with Wendy? It's take what's there, and you've already said, don't get so fixated you're only going to take a certain job because that's what my career plan says.
Yeah, I think it's wrong. You may have a really clear idea about in your mind about what you like to do and how your dream job look like, and that opportunity that is in front of you may only be 10% of what that dream job ideally is. But you have to, as Stuart said, get your foot in the door, and then I guess deliver more than expected. You know, it's if you can exceed expectation, you will get opportunities. And so I think it's about not having an idea about what perfect is and wait for that, but actually just take some action. You know, get an opportunity, deliver on the task in front of you, and if you do well, then opportunities will come.
Okay, no, I think that's really good, solid advice. So can I then move on from the point of view of there's us as individuals applying for roles, but obviously this evening's main theme is about what employers are actually looking for. So we've heard that there's that flexibility, there's that taking the task. Adil, I wondered if I could perhaps come to you and sort of say, you know, from a Royal Brunei point of view, you know, what is it that matters to you? Is it the technical skills of someone, or is it more of their soft skills, or is it a hybrid? I mean, just what does your organisation look for?
Well, our organization looks for more of a hybrid model. So just talking to specifically students who've just graduated, as graduates, you'll already have a significant array of skills and knowledge. And sometimes it may be that you're just not aware of the skills and knowledge you have. So many of those soft skills are transferable, which actually means that they can further be developed into a learning, work, or social context and used to enhance them in other contexts. So, for example, you know, I went to the University of West London, and I was already working for Royal Brunei Airlines, and I was in the journey where I was going to be promoted to be a manager. So at the end of my university journey, I had written a number of assignments targeting specific audience. And of course, involved in that were soft skills such as research skills, planning, organizing. So as an employer, we are very keen to see how potential candidates reflect these skills, not only on the CV, but on the application form, and also when they get the foot into the door.
Okay, no, that's really useful to hear, Adil. Stuart, again, what's from a Sega perspective? You know, automatically I'd probably say, oh, it must be all about the technical, but I'm sure the organization has a very diverse blend of skill sets that you need to be successful.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. In as much as that, whenever you think about computer games company, we think, well, people are developing computer games and it's all going to be very techy. But ultimately, and that is true to some extent. Sega's got a lot of studios that make computer games, but the office in Brentford, Sega's headquarters, that office doesn't have any game developers in it. And in fact, I'm not a game developer either. So there are a whole bunch of jobs that go on in most companies. You know, whether that's sales or marketing or HR or IT or development. And at Sega, some of those are technical and some of them are not. But ultimately, I suppose that whether they're technical or not, you know, which we've all alluded to, is that you really after someone who can work independently and be, you know, and give that extra, you know, and be smart and bring something more to the role. I suppose is that someone not only who can do the job but also can do a bit more. And just on that point, I suppose, is whether people can do a job or not. I think most people who start a job probably can't do the job, but they will be able to do by the end of the week. So, you know, I think if you can get in to a certain extent, that's not to say, you know, you're blagging it or anything, but I mean, it's that if you get your foot in the door, you can show that you're willing and got worth, and, you know, and you're diligent and hardworking, and you're going to give the extra, then you know, that can sometimes be more than the actual technical skills to a certain extent, because ultimately you want someone who can be hardworking.
Absolutely, and I mean, again, that's something that often can get lost, is that just the basic of work hard and put in a solid shift. So thanks very much for that, Stuart. Rasmus, can I quickly come to you, because it's sort of come through from this, and it's a word. I don't think actually I like the word soft skills. It's my view, it's part of being a rounded professional. But you know, we do talk a lot about that, and you do a lot of motivational speaking. So you know, meeting a lot of people about, it's not just the technical, and particularly not, say, the academic, it's the ability to portray themselves. What is your sort of advice about developing soft skills? Because I think too much, and particularly I'm first put hand up as a university, we can spend an awful lot of time working on technical, but do we actually give all of our students enough insight to, you know, what is a soft skill? Is it that I appear confident, or is it, you know, what some people view as a little old-fashioned timekeeping and being able to engage well with a team? And I'm, you know, particularly interested in your views, Rasmus.
Well, I mean, there is this good old saying that you hire for skills, right? What you fire for attitude, and I think that's very much true. I mean, when we recruit players at Brentford, it's we do a lot of work on taking personality references on the players we sign, and I always feel like there's only so much you can learn from a job interview. So we do a lot of work on speaking to other players who've been in the dressing room with that person, or coaches who work with that player, you know, because we really care about our dressing room. You know, we don't want any disruption in there. We want team players. We don't want big ego guys, you know. So it's really important. So you could say that the technical skills, which in football is like, you know, your technical, your physical, your tactical package. That's the access ticket to the game. There has to be something there. But you know, then on top of it, there's all the soft skills. You know, if you are a football player, you need to be able to build relationships with a lot of people. I mean, a football player probably playing, you know, 6-7 clubs throughout his career, and that's a lot of people you have to build relationship with. So social skills is really important, too. So yeah, we do a huge amount of work on that, because I think it's absolutely key for success.
That's really useful. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to take advantage of having put a question to you to actually now pick another one out of some of our participants, because it is directly related to football. So okay. I've got a question here. As a female wanting to break into the typically male dominant area of football, any advice for getting a foot in the door?
Yeah, there's definitely biases in football in many ways, and I think it's just a matter of time before we also start seeing, for example, female coaches and in men's football and other roles as well. I think I mean, you have to make yourself stand out some way, you know, and I think that doesn't matter if you're a male or female, but you will have to bring forward something that will grab the attention of, at Brentford, for example, me, you know, do you have an idea? Have you studied a part of the game that is particularly interesting? Is there a specialist knowledge that you have that you think will be able to make the needle move in some way? You know, if you can kind of put yourself in a position to put that forward, you know, so you grab the decision of the guys making the decisions. I think that's something I look for a lot, you know, is I actually just 2 hours ago, we are searching for an individual development coach, and I was looking through 200 different CVs, and I would try and look for something that makes me curious, you know. someone that challenges me, my thinking, and has a new and extra dimension to what they bring to the table.
Excellent. Well, that's a really great bit of insight to get some real good live insight that there you've been. That's the type of thing you're looking for. So thanks very much for that, Rasmus. Really, really appreciate it. What I want to do is to slightly overlay, and it's almost been that we've sort of spent 25 minutes and I've not mentioned the dreaded pandemic. We all do need to try and get some relief from it at times, but I think it would be remiss to be in a conversation like this with not bringing that to bear. So Wendy, I wondered if I could come to you and say, and is it a case of reassuring the people watching this evening, or is there a need for people to rethink? In light of the pandemic, do you still believe the fundamentals we've been spending the time talking about at the moment, and I'm very happy for you to keep it specifically at hospitality, do you still think those fundamentals are what's going to take us through and will be going to be still key for employing our graduates coming through the sector at the moment, or do people need to be looking at other things as well?
Oh, I think in hospitality, I will guarantee you in 2 years, there will be a shortage of people. We had a dire shortage prior to the pandemic. And we know that we've lost a percentage. I think they think about 14% have gone back to Europe. We don't have that Europe flow in anymore. So I would guarantee within 2 years, you will be highly sought after if you're a good person. And even people during the pandemic, if you're particularly good at your job, got a good reputation, network, all the assets that you need to be at the top of your game, those people are still getting jobs. There are, very rare, but a few out there, you do see that. So I think you just need to be positive. This is just a blip in our time. And this gives you the opportunity to, reassess what you're going to do, how you're going to get to, and be it that you might have to go and do something for another year. If your heart lies in hospitality, it's a fantastic industry to be within, and attitude is 90% of having the right aptitude of what you need to be good in hospitality. So I think it will be there for everybody. Just because we're in a position now doesn't mean to say we're going to be there in 2 years' time. So keep holding on to it, adapt as you need to, gain other skills while you can, and then you'll be ready to, mop up at the end.
Well, that's useful because that links nicely. Again, another question that I've had coming through on the chat has been around, particularly again, people I think who are new into the UK, talking about work references, and you sort of hinted there that part of this may be, even doing not quite odd jobs, but perhaps volunteering. What would your views be to someone who's perhaps new into the UK, but has then volunteered so that at least it's got a bit of a reference? Do you think there are the type of skills, if we can see people have contributed to help us get through the pandemic, that's going to be viewed, as an employer, would you view that as something positive, even if it wasn't in hospitality?
I think whatever happens people will remember the time within the pandemic and what jobs they were doing. So even, if you're an Amazon driver for this year, or you're a friend of mine has gone into doing COVID tests, all of that has skills within it, and caterers are very well adapted to that. So those skills are still going to be viable. So when people look at in 2 years' time and you have that funny blip in your COVID time, just because it's not within your industry, it doesn't matter. What's important is, did you adapt? How did you do within that environment? What new skills did you learn from being an Amazon driver? So there's lots of things that you can still learn within this period, and that can still help you going forward. So I think it's really important to have a positive attitude of what can you do, not what can't you do, and what can be, everything can be part of that journey, not a hinder or a barrier to it.
Now that's really, really useful, because that links again to another question that we've had, and I wonder whether Stuart, I'd be interested in your views on this, which is effectively moves on from what Wendy is saying. Is what is it in your, say if you're in Sega, that is the most probably important element of an interview where a candidate, I think the actual question was, it was about how do I actually ace my interview? So, I think we got a few ideas there from Wendy, but from your perspective, I wonder if you could reflect on perhaps an interview where you've interviewed someone and it was just some little spark that made the difference.
Well, I mean, it's the $1 million question in some ways, isn't it? It's the most important thing, I suppose, is, which we've touched on as well, some of the other speakers, is that it's about your character in some ways. I mean, ultimately, when you're hiring someone, you're probably going to be spending, if you're interviewing them, you might be spending a lot more time with them once they're employed. So, you want to make sure that there's someone that you get on with, and ultimately, I tend to, and my team tend to recruit people who've got a good sense of humour. Ultimately, we're going to spend a lot of time with them, and we want to make sure we all get on. And irrespective of whether they've got the perfect technical skills, if it's someone you get on with and someone you can, talk about with football, or talk about books or films or whatever it is, we have interview questions about what games do you like. And whether you're going to fit in the team. So it's those sort of things that are quite important to us. And a moment that we have when we interview, we sometimes ask people whether they prefer Star Wars or Star Trek, and it's just a bit of a joke question. But ultimately, it's it does touch on it. Whether you're going to get on with people or not. And I think sometimes when you're interviewing someone, you get that bit of a spark, and you're like, do you know what? I really like this person. Got a lot in common with them, or they interest me, and I'd be quite happy to spend quite a lot of time with them, going forward.
No, I think that's an important thing that we all, only when we reflect just how much time we spend at work, we think all about the job from actually developing the technical, but working as a team. And being able to, doesn't mean they all have to be friends, but being able to work in a cohesive environment is something that can get lost. So I think that's really, really useful insight. Adil, I'm going to come to you from two angles. We've had a question, really good, straightforward question is so that I don't misdo it, is how difficult is it to get into the airline industry was the question. But I want to add a little other flavour to you on that. Is you can answer how difficult, but can you share with us what's the one thing you should never say at an interview if someone's trying to get into the airline industry?
Okay. Well, first of all, obviously, I just want to be open and honest that the airline industry has been impacted severely with the pandemic. However, we are seeing, from an industry point of view, we are seeing pent-up demand. And it's one of those industries that has got a lot of different areas which you could work in. So it could be in commercial operations, it could be on the operations side, being a pilot, cabin crew, or ground services. So there's a lot of opportunities, and we are very optimistic as an industry that there will be a lot of opportunities that will open up. In fact, I think that there will be, will actually be really recruiting in a number of areas moving forward. Now, in terms of what you shouldn't say when you are going for an interview and you want to go into the airline industry is that this is a people's industry, and it is an industry where a lot of teamwork is required. So often I interview quite a few people, and one of the questions that we do pose to everybody is, could you tell us one major weakness? And we've got people who tell us that, well, they don't have any weaknesses and that they are able to do anything that's asked for them. But one thing I would obviously advise is that it's a people's industry, and we're there to work as a team. And of course, we don't all know everything, and it's always important that candidates are open and honest, and it all boils down to your character as well.
I think that's really, really useful advice, because another one that had come through, and Adil, if I can ask you first, was around what a panel's looking for in a CV, but I'm actually going to focus more on the question also says in terms of covering letters. And I'm wondering whether how much of what you've just said, you've got some tips around how do I show you that before you've even called me for an interview?
Okay, so in terms of, obviously, in terms of a cover letter, I mean, cover letters should be very short and to the point, but it's really in your CV that we look at some very key attributes. You don't really need to make the CV very long. It can be very, very short, but I mean, I'll just give you an example. One of the things that we always try and look at in a CV, especially if you are applying for any airline role, say, for example, within sales and marketing, is we always look at the commercial awareness of the person. So sometimes it might mean that you need to tailor make your CV to that particular job. And I'm not saying that you need to say, you were doing things that you were not doing. But what I'm trying to say is that you will have skills, like, for example, gained in university, that you can actually tailor make and put on the CV. And that will be of great interest. But what you need to do is you need to create that spark with both within the CV and the cover letter to get a prospective employer interested.
Good. No, really useful insight there. Can I then link, and I'm going to come across to, I'm going to go for two comparators here, probably go for Wendy, and then I'll come to Stuart on the same question, is the thorny subject of dress codes for interviews. Now, being of a man of sort of mid-50s, I'm probably very boring. I'm not wearing a tie tonight, quite rare for me. Any colleagues who have known me at events often wear a tie. So I'm very traditional. Yet I've realized that talent doesn't wear ties and jackets. That's got nothing to do with talent. So I'm really interested in what employers think. How do you go beyond that? Yet I can understand in hospitality, Wendy, you know, being well dressed is an important part of the sector. So your views on how you should dress at an interview.
Well, I think it's appropriate is the word. I once gave a young lad a job just because he was wearing a suit. So we were at a job forum, you know, for unemployed, and this young lad turned up in a suit. And I thought, you know what, amount of ribbing that boy would have got from all his mates. And yeah. I said to him, I'm going to give you a job because you made that effort to do something different, to make sure you stood out and to make sure that you were known. My personal tip is, that particularly if you're female, is to wear something colourful, because when you're being discussed, oh, that person, remember that person that was wearing the orange jumper, you remember that person. It's just so that you can stand out. And I think you have to make the appropriate effort. In hospitality, we're on a stage, therefore how you dress is appropriate. And also it tells you something about the person on how they dress, as to what time and attention they maybe have to detail, or the amount of effort they put into the interview, which goes along with preparing, researching the people, researching who you're interviewed by, making sure that you're well briefed on what's happening, asking the appropriate questions, and making sure you're dressing appropriate for the audience. So, you know, Sega as a network, IT company, you may think, well, I can dress as anything, but that doesn't mean to say the people that are interviewing you are as well slobby dressers. So you need to be very careful about who your audience is.
Okay, no, I understand that. So Stuart, I'd like to go again the same now, to go where you might argue working in a more tech-dominated industry, less important. And is that true? Or again, as Wendy has said, it's about just standing out. I mean, there's a recurring theme here. It's about using every tactic to show an employer why you should get the position. Yeah,
I mean, it made me remember when I was trying to get, when I was being interviewed for a place at university, and it was a very, you know, sought after course. I think there's like 1,000 applicants for 30 places, and I was the only person that turned up in a suit. When I got there, everyone else was in casual clothes, and I felt like a right idiot. But anyway, it turned out that, you know, it made me stand out, and I managed to get in. And I think, you know, I didn't even know what was appropriate, but I thought a suit was appropriate, but I was wrong. And it helped me. But at Sega, I think it's what's appropriate. I think, you know, you get people turn up for interviews and they've got a t-shirt on or they've got a hoodie, and it's like, well, you know, it's you know, you might be capable of doing the job, but it sort of almost reflects like an attitude that they're always already a little bit too relaxed on this thing and might not be taking it as seriously as you want them to. So we, you know, we don't expect people to turn up in suits, and it's not that sort of company. But if someone turns up in a suit and they make an effort, you know, good for them. And if they're, you know, they're smart in their appearance, they're making an effort, that's what it's all about. I'm definitely with Wendy. I've had people turn up with suits at jobs at Sega, and I'm like, you know, just for the fact that you're wearing a suit, you're standing out, and that's a good thing, you know.
It's an awareness of your team and your company, I think.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
No, that's great. No, really, that's great. Always good to put that to bed, that it isn't just me. It is about showing that edge. Now, along a similar theme, and I'd like to come to you, Rasmus, on this one, is the level of research you do about the company in which you're going along. And, you know, I'd be intrigued in say something where such as football, you know, whether again that is as important. If you're looking for a new player, for example, do you expect them to know a bit about Brentford? But more widely than that, I mean, you've published a lot about why you get clusters of certain people in certain cities, countries, etc. Just wonder what your general view was on how much background research knowledge should you have, and how should you present that in an interview scenario?
I mean, the bigger an effort I feel that a player or a staff member has done to try and understand what we do and how they fit into that, the better. I mean, it's a you know, it's a great indication that of that person's personality, attitude. So definitely that's something I look for. Obviously, it can sometimes be difficult to understand from the outside what goes on inside the building, but it's more like you know, that person has actually done an effort to try and understand if they are right fit to the company, but also the company is a right fit to them.
Yeah, that's good. No, that's useful. And the reason I wanted to ask that, Rasmus, and I can open it up to others as well, we've had one or two questions, quite understandably, from participants this evening who either haven't worked for a period of time or haven't been in the UK that long, and are concerned about the importance of references. So I've got sort of what I'd like to perhaps open up now is how strong. I mean, Rasmus, you talked about references around personality, which I think many people can get. I mean, would be open to a reference from anywhere in the world, but also references on technical area. And I can see that is an area of concern. People new into the jobs market, limited round of references. You know, all of the positive things that have been said so far, are they going to get undermined if the reference is probably mainly personality based and not technically based? And I mean, obviously you'll have a view, Rasmus, but I'll come to the other colleagues as well.
Yeah, so you're asking me, sorry?
Yeah. I mean, you've
yeah.
mentioned about personality, but say on a staff member, again there, you know, how important is it, that reference? Because we've clearly got some probably of our students who will graduate soon haven't got a lot of references, and they're concerned that's going to be a major obstacle.
I mean, the personality references are quite important to me, but because I mean, I try and recruit for what you can teach people, you know, and you can teach people hard skills, you know, but it's more difficult to teach them, you know, to have a better attitude, you know. It's so I mean, I would say that is important. I think the soft skills are more disqualifying if you don't have them than the hard skills are. But obviously there are certain jobs where the hard skills are really important. Like if you are a doctor or you're a pilot or something like that, you know, I don't think any of us want surgery of someone who is not good with the hard skills, you know. So so there is an element of that, but that, I think that depends on the context, that depends on the job. But you can always try and bring you know, your references to the table, the ones you have, being active about that, because it can be difficult for the company at times to get in touch with those, you know, people who work with them. There's it takes quite a bit of an effort. So I think you can do a lot to help with that.
I think that last bit is really important, Rasmus, and I think that's, you know, that would be a real positive take-home message. So thanks for that. Wendy, what's your sort of views been over references? Are they an element of affirming your decision, or are they centering the decision process at the first start?
It's quite difficult because a reference, first of all, you're only going to ask people that will give you a good reference, so you'd have to take that into factor. Secondly, it's more difficult to get references with more detail because of GDPR and people only wanted to do the dates you employed. So I think in most times references just verify what you do as a job, but actually what's probably more important is your social practices online, what your LinkedIn says. So I think you need to think not only about the two references that may ask previous jobs, but also what is out there on the internet is a reference about how you've behaved and what you've been doing as well.
Really important point, and I might well come back to that one. That you know, social media hangs around for an awful long time. The advantage with a reference is it'll soon get burnt or lost on a computer, but social media won't. What I'm going to part that, but I'm going to come, and I don't know whether it may be relevant in your sector, Adil, otherwise I might even go to Stuart. Had a question around the increased use of psychometric testing. So we talked about references, we've talked about being positive at interview. I mean, Adil, does your company use psychometric testing at all?
Yeah, we do, but it's very limited to operational staff. So for example, pilots, so very technical jobs. Yeah. But we do not use psychometric tests for other departments such as, you know, commercial, sales and marketing. We used to use them, but we felt that we were actually disqualifying some people who we felt had the potential. So we moved away from psychometric testing from ground staff to only dealing with the technical skilled people like pilots.
Excellent. No, thanks for that insight. Stuart, Sager, do you use psychometric testing at all?
No, we don't. I guess interestingly, well, actually, I had a point on the references, I think, which is just I wanted to mention, which was that actually the concern about references sometimes, I mean, references are generally checked once you've decided to recruit a specific person. And it's only then that you check the references usually, at least in the industry that I'm in. And so to get hung up on references before you're in that position of being shortlisted to in a short list of candidates anyway, I think is worry about that later. Get them to think you're the right person first, and then consider the references later. In terms of the psychometric testing, I mean, I've got a story which I won't tell about me gaming a psychometric test once, and to my own benefit. But Google famously or infamously used to have a recruitment process where they used to do 7 interviews, and you have to have 7 different interviews in order to become to get recruited at Google. And it's very laborious, and whether you make it past the 3rd interview or get to the 4th interview, eventually you get to the 7th interview, and then you fail and don't get the job. And they did that for maybe 5 years, I think, and eventually they scrapped that whole 7-year interview process because they found that it made no odds on who they were recruiting anyway. They still had to fire as many as they used to. But psychometric testing, we know we don't do. I think that stuff can be gained sometimes, and I think I agree with Adele in as much as that it can be limiting as much as anything else.
Okay, good. What I'd like to do now, let's move on to, so we've talked a lot about what will get you the foot in the door. What about once you get in the company? It's easy, you know, it's not all about you're in and you're going to be there forever. About tips of how you sort of cover those first 100 days, and it links to one of the other questions is sort of, you know, how does the company, or the role of the company, to motivate new recruits? And you know, again, Wendy, your general, what have your experiences been about getting new people in? They're coming in all excited. How do you continue with that motivation and early development?
Well, for us, it's about making sure in the first probably month that you're sending the right messages. So there's no point saying, you know, we're a happy company and we're very caring and all of that, and then nobody takes the time and effort to demonstrate that. So as you can see behind me, it says BM Family. We create a family environment, and that's about welcoming cards. That's about making sure those people, the rest of the team, know how we expect behaviours to be. That's about making sure that you're clear of what you're expecting them to deliver, and also what you are prepared to give them in return. So I think in those first months, it's just about clarity and understanding, and also living your values, because otherwise you'll get very confused messages about, well, I thought I was joining this sort of company, but when I've joined, it's actually a completely different type of company. So for me, my advice would be to stick to your values and particularly demonstrate them, because you can't ask someone to be a BM Family member, in our case, if you haven't treated them like a family member when they joined.
Do you have a formal probation period in Bartlett Mitchell, or is it just sort of, it's what you've just said, you just sort of bring people through, or but formally?
No, it's a proper 3 months. Everyone has their 3 months probation period, but that probation period is about not only what does that person do in delivering their job, but how are we doing at making sure we've delivered what we've promised within those 3 months. So I always think people get a bit hung up about probation periods, but it's about, you know, on each side has a responsibility. Just because you're giving someone a job doesn't mean to say you then say, well, that's it, job done, I have no responsibility to make sure that they feel that, you know, they're part of that community, and you are joining a community. It's incumbent on you as the person joining to be able to, you know, network, know what you need to know, do your research, make sure that you're diligent, all those sort of things. Those first months of, you know, getting your reports in on time, or writing good documents, whatever it is, that would be taken into account. And also it's the company's joint responsibility to make sure that they're able to deliver.
Oh, that's really, really useful insight. Rasmus, can I take you a bit further down similar theme, because we've had a question around saying, are we talking about aspects here that are important to just the UK, or are they more sort of particularly around Europe? And so my question would be exactly the same. When people first join, what, you know, have you found from people, you yourself, obviously you've worked in a number of countries. Yeah, again, those first sort of 100 days, do you find that say someone who's spent a lot of their time perhaps in the UK responds in a certain way, or actually most people adapt and evolve in a new in a new position? It's pretty independent to where their previous experiences have been.
I think, I mean, obviously with Brentford, we are recruiting players that are typically somewhere between some you know 17 and 28 years old typically, and a lot of them come from abroad. You know, probably 50% of our squad are not English, and I think when they arrive here, we have a big job to do, and we have a process for this, for, you know, how we integrate them, and that's really from small practical things like getting an apartment, opening a bank account things that can actually be quite a nightmare for people when they first come, you know, try and make that process smooth. But then also we used to have every time we sign a new player, we have a meeting with all the key staff, and we present all the information we have and the research we've done on that person. What are they like? What families are like? You know, sisters, brothers, relationship to parents. You know, is he gonna come here on his own, or is he gonna come here with a brother, or and what do we need to be aware of, just so everyone has an understanding of what's the person likes, and how can we meet that person's needs, and in the first few weeks, months, so we get the maximum return on investment, which is for us performances on the pitch. Yeah. In football, there's been a lot of stories about like clubs paying millions and millions for young players, and then they put them in a big house somewhere without furnitures, and then just they can get on with it. But there's a bit there that the first 100 days, you call it, which are, I think, really key in terms of making that employment successful.
Okay, no, that's really, really useful insight. Stuart, do you suffer at all with Sega, with people thinking it's one thing and then finding it's something different? And I mean, that's, you know, we've joked about, you know, it being Sonic, and we know it's far more than that. And again, I suppose my question is, what about the position? I know we're in a very tight jobs market, but also for our, you know, our graduates going into their first jobs, should they have the confidence that if in that first 100 days it's not working out, similar to what Wendy said, you know, how does Sega deal with someone who says, I've really wanted to work here, and I still think I can deliver, but it isn't quite what I thought. I thought I was going to play computer games all day, and you're asking me to write something down. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, like any company, like all of our studios are subtly different as well, and you know, and they've all got different flavors, and they all operate different ways. And I mean, ultimately, we want, you know, and I want members of my team to be happy and to enjoy what they do, and ultimately take responsibility away from me, so they can look after their things themselves, and I don't need to get involved in their world. And now, if they're not enjoying themselves and they're not enjoying what they do, well, then that's not going to work for them. It's not going to work for us. Ultimately, we want to help them and to become, you know, better at what they do, because it's a two-way relationship. It's, you know, we recruit someone, or a studio recruits someone, and it's the beginning of a journey, and the journey might, you know, take, you know, 5, 10, 20 years with us, and some of our studios and offices have really low turnover, which means that the staff are going to be with us for a long time. So it's important that that relationship works. If it isn't working, we need to find out why. If it just isn't working because it's not a fit, well, you know, we're all adults, and we can have that conversation about, you know, what do we do next? Is there any other opportunities? But ultimately, we want, and I guess all of us here, we want to make sure that everyone's enjoying themselves, because ultimately, if you're not enjoying yourself, you know, at work, well then, you know, you're not going to be very productive, and it's no good for anyone. So everyone's got to try and enjoy what they do.
Exactly. I mean, really, just before I finish with that theme, Stuart, what's the rough, but I'm going to hold you, percentage of people in Sega who have come in, say, quite junior position, and have then gone up through the company? Because there's the other bit we talked about there. We talked about getting the job, talked about the 100 days, but what about a good organization should either develop, and people may well leave for promotion elsewhere, but hopefully internal development. So as a company, does Sega have a good reputation for keeping talent, nurturing talent, and promoting talent?
No, we've got a terrible reputation. I'm only joking. We and particularly, it's something that I really focus on. We've got a department that we've got. It's a 24-hour monitoring operation. There's someone, you know, looking after everything's up all the time. We've also got, and that's quite a junior role, those shift work. And we also got a QA area where people spend you know, their jobs testing games to make sure they work. Today. It sounds like it's a dream job, QA in computer games, but it's not. it can get dull quite quick. But one of the things that we use those jobs for is as a pool to recruit from, because it's easier to find out who are the stars, who's really good, who puts the extra effort in. And within my space of Sega, some of the most senior people that we have within my department have come from those spaces, and we make a point of it. I mean, it's, you know, if someone's really good, it's like, well, you know, let's get them trained up on something else and bring them on a journey. And I think Sega's quite good at that.
That's excellent. No, that's great to hear, because I think that is important. We sort of live in a world where we hear so much about gig economy and no sort of structure through, to say that you do still reward talent and nurture it through. Wendy, how does that work in hospitality? Again, is it similar or less? People tend to move around in companies.
I think in hospitality, people to move around is good, and not necessarily within companies, but certainly within different roles, because if you're going to be a manager of a larger organisation, the fact that you know how a chef, kitchen porter, a waiter, a vending operator operates, it gives you much better understanding if you've been in their shoes. So I've always think if you've had a variety of jobs, that's much better. And you can do that within organisations. Contract catering, the part of business to business catering that we're in, there are many opportunities, and it's Monday to Friday predominantly. So there you have the opportunity to make those changes, but a very structured path. You would have the opportunity for training, any level you can take that. And I think the important thing to remember about that is not the company's responsibility solely to help you on that journey. It is yourself to do that. So during this lockdown period, those people that have been doing lots of training, and there's lots of free training out there, really developed their skills, asked to go on MVQs, all of that, you know, they are the people that are eager for the future. So I think there's lots of things out there you can do to take responsibility yourself, other than just asking the company to say, well, what training days am I going on?
Yeah, no, that's great. Right, I'm going to very mindful of the time. We're just after 7. I'm going to come back with just one question that has come from the audience, but I think it's very relative to sum up. And I'm going to ask each one of the 4 of you for your immediate views or summary. What quality or skill do you think is going to be most important for our graduates as they move into the post-COVID era? Wendy, what do you think is still going to be the most important?
I think one of it is awareness and empathy. How you've dealt with COVID and how you come out of it is not necessarily how other people are. So if in an interview you're saying, oh, well, I was fine, da-di-da, I was, you know, going around seeing my friend, that's not necessarily how other people are. So I think it's awareness and empathy. Thanks
for that one. Rasmus, your thoughts?
Well, I think, you know, who's learned the most from COVID? You know, you know, can you actually reflect on what are you gonna do different? What has these circumstances meant to you? You know, how are you gonna go about your career in a different way? Like that level of reflection, I think, is gonna be important going forward. So you can come out stronger of this.
Thanks for that. Perfect. Stuart.
I'm going to agree with Wendy. I think that, you know, whenever you know, however it's been dealt, you know, what's been dealt to you in COVID, it's been aware that, you know, it might be very different for everyone else. And, you know, like in the computer games industry right now, you know, you know, the situation has meant that the games industry is booming. You know, it just hasn't fallen evenly. And some people are affected more than others, and I think even within our office, some people are affected more than others. And I think that level of empathy that you have is going to be is something that's really valuable.
Thanks for that, Stuart. And Adil.
I think for me, it's 2 things. The first thing is being proactive. So taking advantage of all the opportunities, whether it's volunteering, or whether it's taking advantage of some employers who are running virtual work experience schemes. And also it's being positive. So being true to your passions and your long-term goals, but also realizing that there are many ways to reach your goals and not just using one path.
I think that's really, really great piece of insight from each and every one of you. I'm really, really sad that time's run out. So I'm going to say two things. All of you who have put comments in the chat, I will look to work with Joe and colleagues in comms, and we'll look to get some generic answers out, and we can share those amongst all of you who have joined us this evening. I would just like to thank Wendy, Rasmus, Stuart and Adil. Absolutely been a joy to have this conversation with you this evening. I think your insights have been open, honest and transparent, and that's what's so useful for anyone looking for those bits of advice to get into your career and make sure you do take hold of a career, not just a job. And I think that was something that I found refreshing. So I really thank you for giving up your time. You know, everybody is still incredibly busy, so I appreciate it, and certainly on behalf of the university, thank all four of you, and also want to thank all of you who have joined us this evening. I hope there has been value in what you have got. Thank you for all the questions. As I say, we'll feed back to you as soon as we can, and above all, I really wish you the best of luck in the careers market. For those of you who are current students, please do work with my colleagues in careers and employability. For those of you who are members of our alumni, again, please remember that service is there to be able to support you. And if you are one of our neighbours of the university, please do join us again for one of these sessions. And I hope that we can be part of the community of West London and beyond as we try to develop the best talent. I'm very biased. I know the best talent comes out of UWL, but have that talent out there working on the recovery in each of the sectors that we've had represented here today and beyond. So thank you for joining us, and please join us again in the future. Above all, stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.